We haven't even asked the question about AI regulation, which apparently the U.S. is doing too much of, according to NVIDIA. Okay, questions from the audience. Be succinct, intelligent, articulate, wonderful, as this audience always is. I'll come to the gentleman in the very front row, Ende. I think there's a mic coming to you.
Andy Zemanides with the board of the council. Fascinated by the open plurilateralism, but the unsaid part is the way the U.S. is approaching it, it's all against China. And then China has for years, before the U.S. started giving up on the world system and doing the Quad and all the rest, China was building the BRICS and the Shanghai cooperation. And now we have, it seems IMEC is back on the table, assuming peace in the Middle East. India is on both sides of this debate. At what point will China or the U.S. force the issue? Because it seems India is intent on rebuilding a one-party, non-aligned movement, and that's it. Will either the U.S. or China force India to choose sides?
Please.
So, India's a great example because if you look back over the last 80 years, we had the Cold War, bipolar, pretty, in retrospect, pretty clean. Like we knew sort of what side you were on, and it was proxy wars in between. But there were two sides, and the world was sort of divided that way. That ended about 40 years afterwards, and we had a unipolar moment. It wasn't really U.S. hegemony, but it was sort of the hegemony of American ideals, of liberalism, of international, liberal internationalism. That's over. That ended. And the question is, what comes next? And some people think it's multipolarity. I have a different word for it, which is polyamory. I think we're in a polyamorous world, and India is the archetype of this polyamorous world because, just as you said, and as Raghu also alluded to, India loves the United States for technology, for civil nuclear cooperation, for defense cooperation, for the Indian-American community and the entrepreneurship and the ability to build companies here in the United States. They love Russia for munitions and oil. They love Iran for oil. They love and they hate China, depending on the issue. They're scared of China's imports. They have border issues, but also part of BRICS. And so my guess is that neither U.S. Nor China is going to be able to force India to choose. India is going to have multiple relationships. And you could say the same thing about Brazil and Indonesia and South Africa and much, I think, of the emerging market. I think there'll be very few clear blocks. But a lot of complexity. We're going to substitute sort of what we used to call the spaghetti bowl of free trade agreements with a new spaghetti bowl of these plurilateral agreements or of these polyamorous relationships. It takes a lot of diplomatic engagement to manage a world like that because you're creating coalitions almost issue by issue. Sometimes India will be with us, sometimes they'll be against us, sometimes they'll just be standing on the sidelines. And that, I think, is the challenge for the future administrations.
Rocket.
Two things. One, on the polyamorous world.
I've trademarked this, by the way.
I wonder, though, if the polyamorous world, who sort of deals with the conflicts? It used to be the U.S., the hegemon, who used to apply subtle pressure to, bang heads together and get them to fix things. In this multipolar world, it's harder. And nobody has the incentive to step out and do that head banging. And so I think it's going to be a little more difficult to carry it on, but there's no alternative. I think India would love not to make choices. Be friends with everybody. But I think if push came to shove, does it really sort of think Russia has a future? Does it really think that a strong relationship with China is the future. I think if you just looked at values and look at values beyond the current administrations in the two countries, I think there's much more commonality in values between India and the United States than between India and China or between India and Russia. And so, I mean, administrations on both sides need to build on that. If it just comes down to transactions, which currently both the US and the Indian administration are very focused on, then the commonality becomes much less clear. But when you look at values, look at longer term sense of commonality, I think the US is clearly India's long-term sort of partner.
Can I add one more thing, which may just contradict everything I said before? If you look at the president's recent trip to Asia, one of the agreements he signed, which hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and comes closest to being a real trade agreement, is with Malaysia. Mm. And one thing that was interesting in it is we used to go to ASEAN. ASEAN would say, "Don't make us choose. We can't choose between the U.S. and China. China is our neighbor, it's #1 trading partner." And actually, the president's saying, "Actually, you're going to choose, because if you go with China, we're putting the tariffs on you. And if we decide to put a tariff on China, we want you to put the same tariff on them. And if you join an organization that China runs, then we may put a tariff on you. And you have to choose." And so that's going to be interesting to see. Now, you can do that with Malaysia. I'm not sure you can do that with a country as big and independent, as important as India is. And India has far more options than smaller countries. And so, but we're now entering a world, and I think this will come up in the USMCA too, when that's sort of reviewed, my guess is we're going to tell Mexico that they have to have a common external tariff vis-a-vis China, because we don't want Chinese goods going in through Mexico and coming to the United States. So more of a customs union where they agree to keep Chinese products out as well.